Hey guys, what's up? Thanks for joining another video here. Big special shout out to 58 or 54 or 59 or 50 something subscribers to the channel. That's pretty cool. Don't know who you are or why you watch it, but I'm glad you do. And I'm glad you enjoy it. But tonight, special edition, two famous wrestlers that you don't know anything about. All right. So I'm going to share two famous wrestlers from the World Wrestling Federation. Of course, they started in earlier wrestling circuits, before you make it big. There's Memphis Continental Wrestling and Southeastern Championship. And, well, that's the football team, but I'm just making stuff up now as I go along. But you get the idea. There's smaller wrestling circuits until these guys reach the big time. And I met two world famous wrestlers many, many years ago. I have stumbled across their photographs and I thought, man, what a cool topic for a video. Okay. Also, big shout out to me because I'm wearing a shirt. I'm fitting in a shirt this evening that I've not fit in several years. And I think it looks good. It fits good. So a big shout out to myself here for the weight loss thing and keeping some of the big fat weight off. But tonight, let's start with a gentleman that wrestled in the World Wrestling Federation, and I'm pretty sure he's in the Hall of Fame. He is from Tulsa, Oklahoma, of all places, and this is Dr. Death Steve Williams. I hope I got his original city correct. I met him in Tulsa. Let me clarify, he may be from Oklahoma City or Texas, but I met him. I met Mr. Dr. Death Steve Williams in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and of course you'll get these on the big screen when I do the editing. But super cool guy. Here's a little bit about Dr. Death Steve Williams. He was a football. He wrestled and did football both in high school. And he was a starter his entire time at Oklahoma University, all right, out there in Norman, Oklahoma. And he once saved a man in a car wreck. And as this story goes, the guy was trapped inside the car. Dr. Death Steve Williams pulled the car door off. And it required so much of his strength that he ripped a shoulder muscle by doing so. Save the guy's life, okay? And in the year 2000s, he got clean and off drugs because, as you know, gosh, I mean, like almost every entertainment industry out there, any version of it is just plagued and rife with drugs and alcohol and debauchery. Wrestling is no different. You hear all the stories about these guys get hooked on painkillers, pain pills, and alcohol, because if you've ever really watched what they do in a wrestling event, that ring is not a trampoline. That ring it's a bunch of boards that's covered with a thin strip, what would you call it? Felt padding, and it gives it a little bounce to it. And that's pretty much about it. And they're hitting each other along with the wood floor, the concrete floor, the tables, the chair shots. These guys are really taking a beating from head to toe. So it's very common for these guys to get hooked on pain pills so they can continue to perform these wrestling events, which is some, 300 nights on the road or 300 show nights, if you will. For any one of these guys to get off drugs and alcohol is a huge big deal. So Steve Williams got off drugs and alcohol somewhere in the early 2000s. In 2004, Dr. Death Steve Williams contracted throat cancer. He continued to wrestle until he could not wrestle anymore. Dr. Death Steve Williams was known for being one of the toughest guys in wrestling. There's some guys that come with, you can tell they've been on some steroids. You can tell they've been in the gym a whole lot. They've got a lot of athleticism. Steve Williams had a lot of that, but Steve Williams was also just a big, bad dude in general, just very mean and tough, but just a baby bear in his heart. He became a Christian speaker. So there towards the end of his wrestling career, he began speaking in churches and speaking in youth groups and speaking in group homes, and that's where I met him. So probably this is the year 2005. Yeah, a bit right, about the year 2005. And I'm working at the Tulsa Boys Home, which is a state-of-the-art, multi-million-dollar campus, a therapeutic treatment facility for troubled male teenagers. And they've got some, maybe 60, 70 guys that live there. And Dr. Death came out and was a speaker, a special guest speaker to our seminar room that we had. And so, of course, all the guys fill in. And by this time, Dr. Death had lost a lot of his voice. And so he was, if I remember correctly, he was using one of those microphones that helps amplify your voice because, of course, he had throat cancer. And he gave a dynamite presentation that evening to all the kids and shared his story about being hooked on drugs and alcohol. And of course, when you minister to kids or even especially adults or kids, adults alike, is make good choices. And he just shared his strength, hope, and recovery about some of the bad and very good decisions he made towards the end of his life. And it was a powerful, powerful time. And we all got to meet him and shake hands with him. And when you shake this guy's hand, holy cow, right? I mean, it was 3 times the size of my hand, and you could feel the strength, just the death grip on the other end of it, even in his late stages of life. So it was an honor to meet you, Mr. Dr. Death, Stephen Williams, rest in peace. And so shout out to him and his legacy, the powerful word of strength, hope, and recovery that he shared at the end. And he did make it to the World Wrestling Federation Hall of Fame. And I am so honored to have been able to meet him and just actually chat with him for about 10 minutes at the end of that seminar speaking that he did with us out there in Tulsa, Oklahoma in 2004. And so that is number 1, Dr. Death Stephen Williams. The second world famous wrestler that you may not know these facts about is one of the members of the Four Horsemen. So if you know anything about wrestling or you don't, doesn't matter. Guys, you've heard of the Four Horsemen. You've heard of Ric Flair. And what this was for those that don't know, the Four Horsemen was a wrestling group of just 4 gentlemen, 4 of the best wrestling gentlemen, a part of the National Wrestling Alliance. If I'm getting the right organization they were with at the time when they formed the Four Horsemen. And then they went on to World Championship Wrestling, WCW. And the Four Horsemen has to be one of the most well-known of wrestling groups. And so, long story short, it's basically the best of the best, and these 4 guys are in it, and they're just kicking everybody's butt and taking names, and they're almost the bullies of the World Championship Wrestling. And then the other guys, the real good guys, are trying to always fight them and win. And it's a classic good versus evil. The Four Horsemen were always evil, if you will. And so Mr. Tully Blanchard was one of those guys in the Four Horsemen. And so I got to meet him, and I can't even guess this year. This would have been in 1997, 98, 90, earlier than 1999, 97, 98. And let me tell you where I was. I was in North Carolina. I was visiting, me and Anthony Price went to go visit his brother, Stephen, that lived in, I'm just going to say Charlotte or some part of Charlotte, but it was around that area. And Tully Blanchard actually went to their church. So at the end of it, they were like, let's go meet Tully Blanchard. You want to meet Tully Blanchard? And I'm like, are you kidding me? From the Four Horsemen? And Ric Flair lives around that area as well. And they talked about how Rick would go into their car dealership and just kind of hang out. Because at the time, Anthony's brother, Steven, was the finance manager for this dealership. And so I was like, heck yeah, I want to meet Tully Blanchard from the Four Horsemen. Are you kidding me? And so Tully Blanchard actually played football at Texas State University. His colleagues on the football team were Tito Santana. If you know wrestling, you know this. You know Tito Santana, and the $1 Million Man Ted DiBiase. How cool is that? They all played football together. All right, back in the day. So he joined the Four Horsemen, and of course he won. He was always winning the television title, maybe the Intercontinental Championship title, and then him and his wrestling partner Arn Anderson, they would be the World Wrestling Tag Team Champions of the NWA. So in the 80s, this guy was at the wrestling top of the food chain, okay? And super cool guy. And like Dr. Death Steve Williams, he came to know Christ there towards the end of his wrestling career. In 1989, he was involved in prison ministry. And then when I met him at the church, Tully Blanchard had started a young men's group, and he called it, guess what? Special Forces. How cool is that? So you got this guy, wrestling, world famous wrestler, and he's in charge of your youth group, basically. How cool is that? And when I met him, and just like with Dr. Death, Steve Williams, I shook his hand, and I'm not a huge dude, but I'm no small guy either. I'm 6 foot, 200 pounds. And his hand was, even though he was a little shorter than I was, you could tell this guy was complete solid muscle. Like he could just, with his bare hands, just remove sheetrock off of a house. That hand strength, I was like, holy cow. And such a great guy, and had such a great ministry there at that church. He continues to do those things even to this day. So I thought it was a cool video idea for all my wrestling fans out there. If you're not a wrestling fan, I don't know why you're not. You should be. Because back in the 80s and 90s, seeing these guys with the drama plot, you know, and they used to call it a soap opera for men or whatever. But anyway, highly athletic people, even the fattest people in wrestling, okay, could outrun and outfight me or you any time of the day. And it was largely entertaining. My Nana, Charlotte Allen, she used to enjoy watching Dusty Rhodes and the Honky Tonk Man. I think she loved watching the Honky Tonk Man come out and boogie and dance with his guitar. And as a kid growing up, we would always watch wrestling over there. And so I remember her really enjoying Dusty Rhodes and the Honky Tonk Man. Cool stuff. But I thought you guys would enjoy these two cool stories, two very important people in the wrestling world and doing ministry, speaking to young people, helping them out. And so I thought that was super cool to share. He even had his own little postcard here, and I'm going to put the front and the back on the video there. And guys, thanks for tuning in. Hope you enjoyed this one. See you on the next one.